Well, and a lot of people today would say, you know, there's no God. Truth and morals and everything is how I define it in my life. So what works for me in my life is what goes. That's what a lot of people would say, right?
But if I come up, walk over and shoot you and kill you, what do you have to say then?
Let's take it a step further, even in the realm of morality. I mean, culture has its own definition of morality. And so it got me wondering, and this has been an age-old debate, the whole, in terms of moral absolutes, can anything be objectively wrong in culture?
Well, I think we should define what it is.
Yeah.
Moral absolutes, I got a definition here. It says, moral absolutism is an ethical view that certain actions are absolutely right or wrong, regardless of other circumstances. I mean, I think just based on...
So can anything in this world be like 100% absolutely wrong?
I think so, just based on the aspect of even just, let's take our current justice system, right? I think most people in society, and I mean most as in probably 99%, would agree that things like murder, right? Murdering, killing someone is wrong. Stealing from people is wrong.
It depends on what society you're talking about, because there are societies where that isn't wrong.
Well, and maybe
I guess maybe I'm talking Western where we live.
Well, and
right?
to maybe what Tom is getting to too, some people have objected, well, what about the man that steals a loaf of bread to feed his family? That I know that's a time-old analogy that's been used. Like, is stealing always wrong? Some would argue that's okay. Like,
is killing the guy that's killed multiple people wrong?
Well, and that's interesting because there's a difference between killing and murder. Was there a motivation behind it? Because I would say it's okay to kill in self-defense because murder is doing it under a motivation.
Well, it's a sinister motivation. Like someone, let's say you have someone that's driving along in the car and they T-bone somebody, right? Mm-hmm. They get into an accident and they killed someone. There's no part of that situation okay, probably most of the time, but most of the time that would be considering, well, it was an accident. This was something that was not foreseen. There was no premeditation. It just happened, right? Like someone died, right? So someone killed somebody else, but
yeah. Another example is you're asleep at night. Someone breaks into your house, trying to rob your house in the middle of the night. You have your gun. You shoot him dead. You killed him. Did you murder him?
That's tough.
What did you with the murder? Did you come with this knowledge? I want to annihilate this person, or was it under the motivation of I need to defend myself?
Mm.
I would argue personally that you were killing that person, not out of this malicious intent of wanting to end a person's life. Mm-hmm. So there is a distinct difference between killing and murder. But yeah, to what Tom was saying, yeah, that's a sketchy one.
Going back to your actual question, mm-hmm. Are there moral absolutes?
Can anything be objectively wrong?
And I would have to say yes,
mm-hmm.
because if we don't say yes, then the things that the Bible say are objectively wrong, we don't agree with. So if we are following what is laid out for us in the Bible that this is wrong, that's wrong. Like if we accept the Bible as, the sum total of God's letter to humans in how we are supposed to act, if it's our basic instruction before leaving Earth.
But the atheist will say to you, I don't need a God to tell me what's right or wrong.
Okay, what is the basis of your morality? Because you have one atheist that mm-hmm. say that this is right, this is wrong. Well, it's like, hold on. You're going to have another one that says this is right and this is wrong. Like, even you get to the point where a simple statement, as simple as saying harming others is wrong. We have how many situations that have come up today that it's like, okay, people have been harmed. we can all agree that that's not a good thing. Whose fault is it?
Well, if I'm going to put on my atheist cap, and I apologize to any of my atheist friends, I'll try and represent them well, but as an atheist, they would usually go to, well, culture, like society determines what's right and wrong. That would be a lot of their standard. That would usually the standard they would go to. Not all of them, but
I think that's moving to moral relativism in a way, though, or just relativism. Let's take the example. We're going back a bit here, but if that's indeed the case, if culture should define what is right and wrong, or what is a moral absolute right or wrong. Let's take Nazi Germany, right? Mm-hmm. The Nazi regime passed legal laws that legalized the genocide of the Jews, right? And the killing of their political opponents and imprisoning them. The Nazi culture, because it was a culture, fascism was a culture, that the elimination of your opponents was perfectly justified, right? So, and that was the culture. It was political, it was a government, but it was a regime, but it became a whole culture too, right? So in that case, it was acceptable. It was acceptable to eliminate your opponent's body, just killing them, destroying them, putting them in camps. That was perfectly acceptable. So it's if culture is defining it, so then that means it was fine because it was culture.
That begs the question for the atheist. The atheist will then say, well, they have to ask themselves, was what was done by the Nazis, was that objectively 100% wrong? Or was it just relatively wrong?
Part of the problem that comes with atheism is, so we have on paper, we have a recording of things that we consider morally wrong. And so we can either choose to follow that or not. There are countries out there that have pieces of paper that show, it's okay to kill your wife. Your wife is your property. So they have that piece of paper that says that is their belief system. Atheism has no set of values because that they can fall back on, because someone who grows up in our culture, well, they're influenced by the values that they see in our culture, whereas that culture where it's okay to see or kill your wife, well, then they're influenced by the values of that culture. So if you look at it from an atheistic standpoint, the only consistent thing that you can probably go to is the evolutionary or the animal kingdom, which then it depends on, well, how are we different from animals? But if you go by it, what is applicable in the animal kingdom is the strong survive. So from an atheist standpoint, how do they fight against something that might makes right? Well, yeah. But the people, you can look at all the issues that people have had in history where the strong people, the people in power, have just utterly decimated the people underneath them. So how can you say that is right or that is wrong? If you agree with might is right, okay, because that's something that you see in the animal kingdom that has no value, that has no effect from human society. So if there is no higher power, if there is no God, okay, well, we come from animals then. And if we come from animals, why are we so different from animals?
And what that means that just means that morality is relative to the day and the culture that you're in. So, and if we're drawing from Darwinianism, the Nazis simply were fulfilling the strongest of the fittest. They were eliminating the weaker ones, what they deemed to be subhuman, right? So they were actually sort of fulfilling Darwinianism in a way.
Well, I guess the question then I would actually ask the atheist, can you actually live out your moral relativism? Because what if I physically abused your child? Will you just say that was absolutely wrong? Or would you just say, well, from my perspective, it was wrong, but from your perspective, it could have been okay? I think that's the question I always have for the atheist, and probably many Christians with this morality. You can say morality is relative, but can you can you actually truly live it out to its conclusion?
You can't. I don't think you can, because it would be total and utter chaos. If we just operate on the premise that morality is relative and that anything goes, someone could walk outside their house and be shot down and go, oh, okay, well, that's just, a couple neighbors fighting. Yeah. Like it doesn't make any sense. It's kind of fun. People are more Christian than they like to admit. Most people in society think that murder is wrong.
Well, and maybe that's what you were trying to get with the example of Nazi Germany. I think maybe that's what you were getting at with that.
Because in that culture, it's acceptable to kill your opponents and throw them in prison. And
here's another example.
Mm-hmm.
If you talk to your atheists and you go to them and be like, okay, how can you say that slavery is wrong? Because depending on what culture you look at or what is going on, slavery has been around for, if not all, the majority of human life on this planet. And it's still actually very prevalent today, even though it is against the law in some countries. It is not against the law, and it is just common practice in other countries. I mean,
just the wording has changed. Now they just call it, instead of slavery, they call it human trafficking, right?
Well, and
that's the change. But this was just a piece I read a few weeks ago. Slavery, it's obviously illegal, but it's actually, there's more people enslaved today than any time in history.
Oh yeah,
and that's not something that's talked about.
Well, and there's a country that I currently heard of, and I want to be very careful how I say this, but from my understanding there, it is common practice to buy a female slave from a neighboring country so that they can be either the concubine or the wife or whatnot, but so that the men in the country can have a female companion. And I'm like, this is common practice. So how can an atheist in that situation say that is bad? Like, from our perspective, it's we've abolished slavery. Well, we've at least made it illegal. So from our perspective, it's wrong. From their perspective, it's wrong. Or it's okay. So if you go over there and tell them that that's wrong, well, you're going to get either or one of two situations. Leave me alone. You don't know what you're talking about. This is good for me. Or, I can get mad at you, and then, well, the person, whoever is strongest then, is either right or gets the last word in, right? So it all depends.
I think to add to your point, with the whole, you're going at it by, you're saying to the atheist, what standard do you have? We have a standard. You may not like our standard, but we actually have a standard. You don't have, what is your standard? And I think that's what I loved about C.S. Lewis, who went from Christianity to being an atheist, but then reconverted back to Christianity. He made the simple statement, I see this crooked line, but how do I know it's crooked? I need to know what is a straight line. And the simple thing he's trying to make is there's got to be a standard of what makes a line even crooked to begin with. And it's so simple, yet it's so powerful.
Well, and a lot of people today would say, there's no God. Truth and morals and everything is how I define it in my life. So what works for me in my life is what goes. That's what a lot of people would say, right?
But if I come up, walk over and shoot you and kill you, what do you have to say then?
Well, I would say that's wrong.
As you're bleeding out.
Yeah, I'd be pretty pissed off. I'd be dying, but I'd be pissed off, right?
So could the atheist then say, well, you shot me. It wasn't objectively wrong. You're just...
No, maybe it wasn't murder. There's a little hole in my stomach that I'm bleeding out like liters, but,
you're just doing you. You're doing what you need to do.
Yeah, you're in my way. You're making it so that I can't live my life the way I want to live my life.
So moral relativism, it looks extremely attractive, but I think the challenge is to its actual logical conclusion. There's some flaws.
It looks very attractive when the values of society are set a certain way. Because if you want to have moral relativism, I'm sorry, I still think that if you are starting to have wrong thoughts in some countries, and you're like, oh, from my morality, shouldn't be a problem. Well, if the government tells you it's a problem, and they'll come and kill you if they find out that you're going against them, then moral relativism doesn't look attractive at all.
Yeah, it's only attractive when it seems to be convenient for us. When someone gets in your way.
Well, and I think that's why we have systems in place in this world just on their own propagate that there are moral absolutes. Like, someone, whatever. So going back to the thing of just say murder, whatever. So some serial killer guy, he's killed a few people, right? He goes to trial, right? He goes to trial. Goes before the jury. They hear all the evidence. He gets convicted, right? And he goes to prison for a very, very long time. I would say probably nobody in society questions that. Okay, that he's a serial killer, he killed a bunch of people, and he's gone to prison. We are generally all okay with that. Like, we don't really question, oh, yeah, he's a serial killer. Did he murder them, or just, did he not? Or we, I mean, they do that in the trial, obviously, but the actual outcome, society itself doesn't really question that. We pretty much accept the ruling of the justice system.
Basically, so what it comes down for what you're saying is it comes down to the evidence. But I think there are certain things that we have certain rules in society, and I think that you can actually look at this from an objective standpoint. And if you look at it, depending on what value system you fall under, mm-hmm. or what belief system you fall under, there are certain things that keep popping up that time and again are proven to be things that we do not want in society. Because if you look at it from an objective standpoint, what are laws? Laws are things that we put in place to say that if we don't do these things, our society is more likely to function in a good and proper way. It is going to function in a way that will harm the least amount of people. And murdering other people seems to be up there. I mean, like, you can look at it. The 10 Commandments are very persuasive, or like they're all over the world in laws and all that stuff. Not necessarily the idolatry and stuff like that, but like, oh, do not murder. Try to stay loyal to your wife and, not step out on her. Now, different societies have different versions of that and stuff like that. But it's just like, there are certain things. And I think one thing that actually is even a good comparison is any society that has really governed in, there seems to always be, you do not try and destroy the innocence of children.
Yeah, that's pretty sacred. And even with everything going on in our Western culture today, like, the innocence of a child is still one of those sacred things, right?
I would say that that's one of those things that throughout history, once we've reached a certain level, that a good way to make people mad in a society is to mess with children in that society.